Let's jump right into it. This is Brother Mike, and I'm broadcasting to you from Worcester, Massachusetts. And I come to you periodically with timely subjects, and one of my favorite subjects is, of course, the comings and goings of the Worcester Police Department. This video is on that subject, and just to start off, I have a general question. Is it me, or is it becoming apparent that the Worcester law enforcement community has wandered off the trail? We've had some pretty surprising developments with the Worcester Police, and you can call me biased if you want to. You'd be wrong though, but I have personally been on the receiving end of some of these practices, and even have a case pending in United States District Court for incident that I experienced with the police. But this incident hasn't biased me. What it's done is it's made me aware. It's made me kind of focus in a little stronger on our police department and its role in the community. Now, obviously, the role of the police in any community is to maintain the peace. They call it protecting and serving. It's a very noble ambition, And with the firepower they have and the ability that they have to wreak havoc if they so choose, it's good that they have this ethos guiding them as they go about their task. Well, we're coming to find out and discover here in Worcester that we're sadly lacking in that ethos. We've got some real problems with the police, and that's what this video is about, I mean, with my increased sensitivity to this subject, it occurred way before Ferguson, Missouri. So I've been tracking with this thing prior to it becoming a national issue. And there are a number of factors in play that are really warping the police's ability to fulfill their mission, which is to, as I said, maintain the peace. And that's why I've entitled this video, Worcester Police, a department at war with itself. The indicators are pointing to a looming systematic failure. I'm going to run those down for you. You can be your own judge, but I think you'll agree with me that there's so much stress on the components of the law enforcement apparatus here in Worcester that if it was a plane, the rivets would be popping. We'd be in serious trouble. Let's look at a couple of these factors. First of all, you got a 20% poverty rate in Worcester. Now that poverty rate comes with a lot of issues. And poverty and crime, unfortunately, kind of go hand in hand. So we don't have a shortage of crime here in Worcester. In fact, we've got an escalation in the criminal activity here in Worcester. We're seeing the public, some segments of the public anyway, kind of go into a little bit of a panic because it is so apparent that something is definitely wrong here. For some reason, when you have a diverse culture and society like Worcester, one of your obligations in leadership is to make sure that each one of these segments of the culture feel as though they have a voice in their society. I don't think that's occurring here in Worcester, and as a result, there's a lot of people running around feeling alienated, and sometimes this alienation, is compounded by a poor family life, poor community surroundings, lack of things for the youth to do, and they go off the rails a little bit, Well, it's becoming a little bit more than just a little bit here in Worcester. I mean, we've got young people running around with guns now, shooting at each other in broad daylight. That's a major indicator that something is wrong, So, I mean, it's not a real easy situation to assess. And when the police handle these matters and when they go about, establishing their profile in the community, they have to be very sensitive, to these issues, and to the diversity in the community, which they are apparently not, because we've got some instances involving minority people here in Worcester that show us that we are in a state of disarray. You know, number one, look at the school systems. Lately we've been having a lot of talk about the schools. Crime in the schools. Children misbehaving, lack of discipline, lack of scoring. So what is the solution? Well, this school year, the Worcester Police is adding police to the schools. I'm not saying that this is a bad idea. It's unfortunate that we need this because, children should find learning a kind of a fun experience. I know myself when I was in high school, in 4 years of high school, I only missed about 3 days of school. I look forward to going to school every day, even though I had some problems. We have problems no matter what we do. But school should be a refuge for these children. It should not be a place where they go to act out, to become a little bit more active in their criminal life, and rather than their educational life. So we've got a problem there with the schools. And again, we have a rising gang violence here in Worcester. Race-based white hysteria is again kind of taken over. But the inability of the government to remediate these injurious social issues, as mentioned above, doesn't help. But exacerbating the situation is the negative impact by the duty of care that the police fail to embrace in their work. The average citizen is only wants equality, equal protection of the law. We don't have that in Worcester. We have a police department that and elected officials who seem to cater to the same people groups. If it's okay with those people groups, they assume it's okay with the whole community. Well, that's not the case, because you can't ignore certain sections of the community and then conclude, that all is well. You know, and major errors have occurred that are contributing to the downfall of Worcester. Worcester is in decline. Worcester is on a grease skid, and it's costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. And these errors are avoidable. You know, let's look at the latest incident that is contributing to this decline in the integrity of the policing here in Worcester. We had a joint state police and Worcester Police um, raid on a residence here, a SWAT team raid about a week ago. Well, these guys broke into the wrong house. And if that wasn't bad enough, they broke into a home of a family, a Hispanic family, two small children, one of them learning disabled, and they basically terrorized these people. They had a no-knock warrant. They got their information from an informant who apparently gave them bad information. They burst into this home and scared the bejeebers out of the inhabitants. The poor mother was naked when the police came in. They didn't let her put any clothes on for 10 minutes. And to add insult to injury, their behavior during the course of this raid was totally reprehensible. There was a lot of profanity being used. There was a lot of disrespect being used. The fact that these people were Hispanic could have something to do with this. But they went way over the top with their abuse of this family. Matter of fact, like I said, they didn't let the woman put a stitch of clothing on for 10 minutes, and they finally called a woman police officer into the scene. And demanded that this naked woman be searched, and even the woman police officer herself said, "Well, search her for what? She's naked. Well, search her anyway." I mean, this is the style and the caliber of policing that goes on here in Worcester. Breaking into the wrong house. I want to go back a couple of years. I mean, this is not an isolated incident. You go back to 2008, there was a notorious case. A young 16-year-old Vietnamese girl, Na Trong. I keep bringing this up in previous videos because I think it's a heinous example of the police abusing their authority. This girl, who was a 16-year-old child in a dysfunctional family, taking care of an infant uh, son. This girl had a young child of her own. Mother was alcoholic and, just a mess in the family. And she had to kind of step up to the plate and function, more or less as the mother in the household. Well, this poor child died of sudden infant death syndrome. Well, when the police got a hold of her, they practically tortured this girl into confessing to a crime that she didn't commit. The techniques that they used on her. Police can use a certain degree of coercion when they interview a suspect, but they can't force somebody to involuntarily um, admit to a crime that they didn't commit. And this is what they did. They promised this child, a 16-year-old girl, that they would help her family, get her and her brothers and sisters into foster care, and basically they'd live happily ever after if only she'd confessed. And she did. She confessed to a murder that she didn't commit. She thought she was going to go home after she confessed. I mean, this is how naive this girl was. Well, she didn't go home. In fact, she didn't even have the opportunity to attend her own child's funeral. And she was put in prison for 2 years and 8 months for a crime that she didn't commit. Now, you'd think they would have learned a lesson from that. Well, recently, there was a case involving a 18-year-old African American gentleman. His name was Mr. Monroe, and they did basically the same thing to him. They coerced him into confessing to the rape and robbery of three young women, and he was convicted of this crime. However, the conviction was overturned when the Supreme Court determined that his confession had been coerced. They threatened him. He had a small child of his own, and they threatened him with removing the child from the mother's home and having the child put into foster care, which is something that the police don't have the power to do. And on the heels of that uh, type of intimidation and coercion, this young man involuntarily confessed to these crimes. Well, the bad part is that if they do retry him, which I'm sure they will, there's going to be certain elements of the confession that they cannot use against him. So they compromise their case. This is a guy that deserves to be in jail. But because of the poor police work, the intimidating tactics, and the coercive interrogation methods, this guy gets another shot at it. So we can look at other instances. Uh, the rape accusations against the police. We have to kind of salute them on this. The perpetrator was a Worcester police officer. The victim was a woman, and she didn't even want to get involved with it. The last thing she wanted to do was have this thing go to trial. But the Worcester police pushed forward on the matter, and it ended up with a conviction of one of their own, which is commendable. But you know, unfortunate, to say the least. We have other instances of police kind of going off the rails here in Worcester too, and it speaks to leadership. It speaks to how are these people being supervised. How are they being trained? what do they really know about the constitutional rights of the citizens, because they are in violation of them so often? Case in point, another Hispanic member of our community, a 62-year-old woman. Police were dispatched to her home 3 times on 911 calls. Neither time did she admit to calling 911. Finally, on the third showing up at this woman's house, a police officer had a mental lapse, went off the rails, got so sick and tired of showing up that he insulted her because she's a Hispanic, and then picked her up off the ground and body slammed her on the floor of her own apartment, giving her internal injuries and multiple broken bones. Now this is, you don't have to. I don't have to tell you, that this is something that the police should not do, right? you know. Well, this woman's going to be about 400 and something $1,000, richer after this thing winds its way through the federal court system. Speaking of which, when you look at Worcester, there are about 14 police brutality, civil rights cases pending in the United States District Court. This is compared to 20 in the entire city of Boston. So we've got some problems here with the police violating people's civil rights, and it's no joke, people. It's a clear and present danger to the rights and privileges that all citizens are supposed to enjoy in this city when the police function as they do in situations as I have described. Well, let's kind of get to the essence and the root of the problem. We can talk about these things, we can kind of examine the fruit, the bad fruit. But until we lay an axe to the root of the problem, we're never going to get to a solution. And at the root of this problem is a principle. And that principle is this: let the master be the servant to all. Let me tell you something, people. In order to be a good master, you first have to be a good servant. Look at the example of our Lord Jesus Christ. He spent his entire life in servitude to his apostles and the people that he spoke with in the world that he lived in. He sacrificed his life, for them so that they can be free. This is totally, totally unselfish. We need more of this ethos. In fact, the Bible goes on to say that the systems of the world are demonic. And why are the systems of the world demonic? Well, they're demonic because our leadership does not embrace this ethos of being the servant to all. And until they do, we're going to have demonic systems. We have an election year coming up here in Worcester. September the 8th, we're going to be packing the ballot with candidates. And I want to encourage everybody to get out there and vote. We need some changes in leadership here in Worcester. We need new blood. We need new voices. We need new eyes. We need new feet on the ground. We need new perspectives being aired and discussed in our halls of justice. We need new leadership, I believe, in the police department. Because the way things are going now, we're amassing millions of dollars in judgments against the police that are being paid by the taxpayers. Here's another example for you. Going back a few years, the MCAD found out that the Worcester Police Department discriminated against certain African American officers and refused to, promote them to the sergeant level. Well, this case has been dragging on. There's been no settlement negotiations. The Worcester Police have been adamant in opposing the case. And as the clock ticks, the interest payments on the money that will eventually be paid to these people to which they are entitled adds up. I think it's up around the $2 million mark, How much can we afford? I mean, this community is not a rich community. People struggle every day here just to keep their heads above water. And a lot of them don't do a very good job at it. We've got a citizenry here, like I said, we have a 20% poverty rate here, but we also have a rate of hopelessness and misery that's basically off the charts. Look at the abuse of alcohol and narcotics in this town. It's just shameful to see these people walking around like zombies in a condition of self abuse and being related to like they're criminals when they're really sick people. And they're sick because the society, in part, everybody has a personal responsibility, but this society, in part, can be held responsible for the condition of these people because they force them to live on the margins through lack of opportunity and the way they relate to them, you know and it's no joke. We've got a lot of problems here. So, you know, on the one hand, we have the leadership at fault for not being servants to the general population in the true sense. But we have to accept a little bit of responsibility ourselves, citizens. We live in a society of rights and duties. We love to complain about our rights being violated, but we don't talk a lot about the duties that we have. And we have a duty, people, to contribute on the level that we can as individuals to a better society. And I'm going to offer a solution, and it's another bedrock principle. And it says that we've got to simply love one another. The Bible says where there's no love, there's the law. And if we don't like these cops and the way they behave and the threat that they impose upon us with their lack of proper training and their ethos, where it's almost like half of them haven't even read the United States Constitution. Why don't we love each other a little bit more? Why don't we be kinder to each other? Because police don't show up at anniversaries and birthdays. They show up at domestic disputes, murders, robberies, bad things. Things that happen when people don't love one another. If we love one another, people, we'd have a presence of the police in our lives. So even though this is a very simplistic answer, it's the solution. But people hate simplicity. People want to complicate everything. And I think it makes them feel smart. Makes them feel important when they can go on and on and on. With some of the senseless dribble. That it doesn't amount to a hill of beans. When you can express it so simply. Just love one another, people. And also, do your job. I mean, we all have a job to do in this society. Do your job. You want to be an effective part of a team, do your job. Say hi to your neighbor. Be kind to a stranger. Stop your car when you see somebody on a crosswalk trying to cross the street. All these things make this community a little bit more livable. And only we as citizens have the ability to execute these things. So let's try doing a little bit more of that, But people, I just want to conclude by saying it's always a pleasure to be here with you. And in terms of the Worcester Police Department, thank God, we have the Department of Justice come into our town and kind of do a top-to-bottom look at the problem. That's another indicator that, yes, we do have a problem. And I hope that in this election cycle that we are able to replace some of these old heads, that are just there to perpetuate the status quo and to take care of their cronies and, make a name for themselves with some people that really care about the rank and file citizen. We badly need this. So this is Brother Mike signing off. And once again, may God richly bless you.